My name is Josh Henschke. We are with the Maize Blue review, and welcome to the very first episode of Rise to the Victors podcast. It's our weekly podcast. Now we are officially in game week. The games are here. We can finally, stop talking about the prognostications, the what ifs, everything else in between. We can finally start talking about real football. It is here. And joining me is the majority of the crew, the Maize Blue review crew here. We've got Trevor, Davis, Brock, and Zach Libby is here, gracing us with his presence. We've got Davis on the road doing whatever the heck he's doing in his daily travels because he's Mr. Davey Scoops and he's, big timing us now. So he's too good to be in front of a computer. So he'll just have to follow us in the car. So with that out of the way, for those watching video, of course, you can see and get distracted by Davis's pro camera work too. But anyway, I digress. Getting back to the topic at hand here, we talked about it in our Twitter Spaces. If you're not following us on Twitter, you should do so. With the news on Saturday that Jim Harbaugh announces that Cade McNamara is going to start week 1 against Colorado State and J.J. McCarthy will start week 2 against Hawaii under the lights. So it's kind of an interesting, situation, a dilemma a little bit in a way. It's really unprecedented if you think about it, considering where Michigan was a year ago, what it did a year ago. And now you're, kind of creating a little bit of shockwaves here with your quarterback competition because you have a guy coming back who helped. I mean, realistically, you got two guys who come back who's helped, bring you to the precipice of national title conversation, and it could very well do so again this year. So it's a very interesting situation, but this podcast is a very roundtable like situation, so we're trying to keep it nice and cool, and so we're just gonna talk about it. I guess Trevor, we've obviously harped on it a lot over the summer, the spring of JJ versus Cade versus JJ. What happens when this happens? What happens when that happens? Well, we're finally here. We're in the last couple of days of practice time and game prep as we head into Colorado State. So I guess what are your general thoughts about the Jim Harbaugh's decision as a whole? Do you agree with it? Do you think it's the right move, or would you have hoped to have seen something else happen?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have the benefit of letting it play out before we decide, was it the right thing to do? Right now, I mean, the initial shock of it, just to go on the podcast with Jansen and say that, and then the Twitter account put out like the official statement in a graphic, that leads me to believe they wanted to get out in front of this, that they were going into week 1 and wanted to have the most normal week of prep they could. And they knew this was going to be hanging over it. And they just came out and said, look, in the past, we've waited for, whose shoulder pads does Harbaugh beat before the start of the game. And I think for him to come out and say, look, they both have done everything we've asked. We think we can win a championship with either quarterback. We're going to give each one a shot in a game. I think my biggest question is still, what does that mean? Right? Is JJ basically not coming in at all in that first game, and then Cade's not coming in at all in the second game? Is the other one going to still get packages in the first half, or only play when the starter gets pulled? There's still questions about the semantics of it. But I think the one thing we had right all along was this QB battle was going to go into the season. I think we knew that because you needed to see what happens on the field. Cade wasn't going to get benched before the season began unless he just had some terrible camp, which it's been the opposite, right? We've heard a lot of good things. Cade all offseason has done the things that he needs to do. He's said the things that he needs to say. He's been rewarded with being a captain because of that. So it's weird. It's different. It's Jim Harbaugh, right?
Yeah,
so
right. Yeah, I couldn't sum that up better myself. That is a very Jim Harbaugh thing to do. You're left with a lot of WTF moments when you cover Jim Harbaugh, and this was the way it was announced, the way it was released. It's very It's very peculiar, but that's just how it goes. But before I bring Davis into the topic, we've got two fresh voices who weren't on the spaces, and it can kind of bring a fresh perspective of something that we haven't hammered on. So I want to bring in Brock into this question. Brock, what are your thoughts on this whole situation at the quarterback spot? Do you like this format? And what are you kind of hoping to see out of both Cade and JJ week 1 and week 2?
Yeah, so like you guys already said, it was pretty stunning last night. What was it, Saturday, when Harbaugh went on the podcast, laid out basically the entire depth chart, and then Trevor, like you said, the official football team posted on Twitter and social media that here's what we're going to do. I just think it's interesting, though, the way I interpreted it, that Cade's going to play the whole first game and JJ's not going to see the field, and JJ's going to play the whole second game and Cade's not going to see the field. Now, if you're Michigan and you're up by 40 or 50 in either game, I think it'd be smart. Maybe you put Davis Warren in to back him up. That way you're not getting Cade and JJ playing both in the same game. That's the way I interpreted it. And one other thing, I'm a huge fan of easy cupcake non-conference games because you can do stuff like this.
Mm-hmm,
even
absolutely.
if you take last year, for example, you're not riding Cade first game and JJ against Washington under the lights. You're sticking with Cade, and because you didn't know how good Washington was going to be. So I'm a huge fan of easy non-conference games, and it gives you the opportunity to do something like this. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that the major takeaway from this whole thing is that we don't have to overcomplicate it. When it comes to discussing this quarterback situation, it's JJ is going to play, Cade is going to play. That's it. Now, what happens from there after week 2 is a whole different conversation in itself. And, I'm sure there's specific guidelines set out by both Harbaugh and Weiss and Sharon as well of what they want to see in terms of who they go with. And, it's tough because it's kind of a double-edged sword when you talk about these cupcake schedules. It's like, yes, you're afforded these opportunities to do these things, but do you get enough of a sample size where you say, okay, I feel confident that, JJ put up 300 yards and 3 touchdowns against Hawaii. Do you feel comfortable naming him the starter and then, trotting him out for Big Ten play? Because pretty quickly coming up, you're going to be in Iowa at Kinnick, maybe at night, maybe not at night. We don't know yet, but that atmosphere is not friendly for a player, an away player. It's just not. So, that conversation of where things go after that is going to get interesting. But yeah, we really don't have to overcomplicate things here. At the end of the day, it's JJ's playing, Cade's playing. Bottom line, they'll go from there. And so I want to bring Zach in here, and I kind of want to take a different angle with this in terms of, recruiting. When it comes to, the quarterback situation, and how the quarterback looks, the potential quarterback, let's say Jaden Davis, for example, because obviously you just spoke with him this week. How do you think this battle kind of implicates recruiting? Because JJ's playing, and this may have something to do with it, this may not, but JJ's start under the lights is also Michigan's biggest recruiting weekend of the year so far. So I don't know if that's going to have any implications or not, but how do you think like a potential quarterback recruit, say a Jaden Davis, a Bryce Underwood, or whoever, how do you think they would look at this situation and kind of interpret things in terms of, where they might factor into the future?
I really wish I got to talk to Jaden yesterday, instead of Wednesday. Like, a way for Michigan to throw it out on a Saturday night for a news dump thinking I was going to watch. I think I wouldn't say it reflects on what recruits should look out for Michigan in terms of what Michigan wants out of a quarterback. I don't think like Davis, if he continues to have interest, Michigan will think like, you know, if JJ starts, I got to mirror him in order to like have a chance to play. But I think it just shows that I wouldn't say that Michigan is not going, you know, is what's the word? They're not remaining loyal. I wouldn't put that, but they're also smart enough to know that, you know, leaving a kid like JJ on the sidelines is just unacceptable. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm Team JJ because I'm a reporter and I have no say in the fight, but you got to go with the talent. You got to go with the person with the highest upside. You got to go with the guy who can break you, you know, get you above the threshold of a college football playoff semifinal. But it's interesting because I know that you mentioned in the spaces that, you know, Hawaii is going to be a big recruiting weekend, you know, because it is underneath the lights. It is going to be it's going to be an interesting experience, especially for some of these guys who's never seen a Michigan game in person, but have it under the lights is just something different. Even if it was in the day, I don't think that has a sway in it. It just, I guess from my point of view, having JJ for the Hawaii game is just, it gives Michigan a representation to these recruits of how willing they are to shell out in offense and show how capable they are of being an offensive firepower underneath JJ. So it would be more interesting if Jaden or any other quarterback like Bryce Underwood, like we mentioned, or even other 25 quarterbacks that are in the fray end up going to Hawaii. We don't really know much. We don't know the attendees besides one right now. That's a guaranteed, but it would be interesting to see if Michigan makes it an effort to like invite quarterbacks to a Hawaii game for the sake of just watching JJ play on the field. So, you know, I guess we will wait a couple of weeks to see who's actually on the attendee list, and then that theory that you mentioned on the forum will have some you know, truth to it. So it'll be interesting to see, but I don't think in terms from a recruit standpoint, if you know, they're not looking at loyalty or you know, how they treat their quarterbacks. It's just a matter of who they think is the best one to compete, and we'll see how that happens in the next 2 weeks.
I just want to take a moment to recognize Libby's chewing ability mid-sentence, just going into his spit cup midpoint during his point there. So, you know, it was very poignant. And kids under 18 don't do tobacco. That's bad. Stay in school. Don't do drugs. Stay away from alcohol. Just say no. Okay.
I call it a hobby more than an addiction. So.
That's my public service announcement for the day. And moving on, and now we're going to bring back the esteemed Davis, who's actually has a change of scenery now. We can actually see him not driving in a vehicle, which is great. So Davis, yesterday in the Twitter spaces, you brought up a really good point about the quarterback situation. You know, what's it going to look like? What's it going to take for the quarterbacks to kind of to seize the starting opportunity? What's it going to take? What are these guys going to do? What do they have to do in order to, you know, to take over the spot from the other? So I kind of want you to expand on that point a little bit that you had, you know, and kind of give your thoughts on the general outlook of these next 2 weeks while we're at it as well.
Yeah, man. Well, I got back in my room. I was driving, but I'm good now. Got back in front of my computer, so we should be good to go. But yeah, about what I was mentioning, I think it's interesting. A couple of the comments Harbaugh was making, particularly when they were deciding what quarterback will play game 3 and on. And one of the terms he's using more and more often, and honestly, it's a Matt Weiss term, is points per drive. Like, that's something that's very interesting. How are we going to look at that when there's two totally different caliber opponents? Cade McNamara, well, let's not say Colorado State is particularly a great team or anything. That's a respectable program that makes bowl games more than not. You know, how are we going to look at points per drive in comparison of Cade McNamara playing a better opponent than JJ's Hawaii? Hawaii is one of the worst teams in the entire country, who just got beat 63-10 by Vanderbilt. You know, how can we look at points per drive and think that that's a fair comparison between the two? And I think it's something that's very interesting. Along with, I think continuity is another issue that they're going to run into. How do you bench the starter of game 1 just to bring him back game 3 if your game 2 starter throws for 5 touchdowns or whatever he does against Hawaii?
Yeah,
it's beyond interesting, and it's something that I certainly don't have the answer for, and I'd appreciate if anybody could help me out with that one.
Yeah, you know, I mean, Matt Weiss is a big analytics guy, so a lot of his decision is going to be based on the analytics side of things. So, yeah, I mean, what does that look like? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I mean, there's really only one way to find out, and, you know, we'll find out Saturday, you know, for at least the first half of the equation of how that kind of figures and factors in. I mean, we'll see. I don't know what it's going to take, but, you know, you better hope it's a victory both weeks. I mean, considering the opponent, I mean, you might have bigger problems at hand than just quarterback if you're, you know, if the team is going to be struggling. So, yeah, I mean, again, you know, they're fortunate to have these 2 weeks to be able to do this. But there's still a lot of moving parts of this quarterback battle and what to expect moving forward. And, yeah, I mean, again, we'll find out Saturday, the first half, the first half of this equation, and, you know, heading into week 2. So, but I do want to shift away from the quarterback conversation because I think we've pretty much beaten this thing to a bloody pulp in terms of breaking it down from every single angle. But, you know, before we move on to Colorado State and the grand, you know, expectations of this week, I kind of wanted to touch on the depth chart a little bit. I think Harbaugh gave a pretty extensive breakdown, not a full breakdown. I mean, we might hear a little bit more when he meets with the media on Monday afternoon, and he might, you know, divulge a little more on maybe the running backs, which he didn't mention. You know, briefly mentioned tight ends, but you know what you have there. But, you know, for me, I think the biggest surprise, and I think that's kind of the topic we'll go around here and just kind of give our biggest surprise or you know, the biggest positive of what Harbaugh mentioned. But I think the biggest positive and surprise for me is that Mason Graham is a starter at defensive line as a true freshman in base packages. So obviously Michigan runs multiple packages. They're going to have different looks up front. And, you know, when you have multiple defensive linemen, defensive tackles on the field, you know, Mason Graham is going to be one of those. And, you know, we've been pretty high on Mason Graham since he was a commitment during that COVID cycle. And I think Michigan lucked out a little bit there in regards to him, because he was severely under recruited compared to his talent coming into Michigan. And a fun fact too, when a player wins the Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of California, he's a 5-star player. It's always been a 5-star player. And I don't know the exact stat, but, you know, obviously Mason Graham is not a 5-star. He's a 4-star guy. And I think that kind of speaks to what Michigan is getting. You know, I think he's a talented guy. We knew this coming in, and he's only done and proved what we thought he was going to do, and that's contribute right away. And obviously not to mention Kenneth Grant as well, another guy who was severely under recruited for where he was. I think if he played in a better division than they did in Indiana, I think we'd be talking about him being in at least a high 4-star, low 5-star kind of range. I think, you know, he's that good. So Trevor, I want to take it over to you. Kind of, I know, you know, you and I have talked about this a lot, you know, what about the depth chart and everything. You know, what were your kind of major takeaways, big surprises, you know, biggest positives from what Harbaugh, and just through fall camp in general? It doesn't necessarily have to be from what Harbaugh said on Saturday.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one thing people need to understand too, you know, if you sit there and you add up the numbers of people that Harbaugh said are starters, there's 15 guys on defense that are starting, right? So with the different packages they do and who subs in and subs out, you know, somebody like Mason Graham is a starter when we've got him as, you know, the third defensive tackle, essentially a defensive end and a 5-man front, right? So Makari Page is a starter as the third safety. Sainer still is a starter at nickel, right? So a lot of names, and like you said, Harbaugh really doesn't like pulling too many like that normally. So it was kind of interesting to see the massive amount of information he gave on the depth chart. I've seen a lot of people, in terms of, positive, concerned about Mason Graham being named a starter. Sainer still converting from offense to defense, being named a starter. Yeah. Makari Page, a guy that got skipped over by Rod Moore last year, being named a starter. And they're taking that and thinking, does that mean other guys have not developed or other guys have dropped off? Or, is this a good thing the young guys are coming up so quick? And I think it's important to say what you said. Mason Graham was either the best player in California or at worst top 5. Yeah. That's a 5-star talent, right? Like, absolute steal. The guy was physically ready when he got to camp. So it's not shocking that he's starting. He's not ahead of Rayshon Benny because Benny fell off. Another guy Harbaugh said great things about. So, and the same thing, I'm bringing up the quarterback thing again, just to make a point of the whole, you've got 2 quarterbacks, you don't have anything. If somebody's going up the depth chart or earning a starting role by default, that's not a good thing, right? But that's not what's happening anywhere on this roster, right? So Jones starting at right tackle. Carson Barnhart is a starting tackle on every team in the Big Ten this year, except Michigan, right? Yeah. Like, he's that good. Jones might be an Ojabo type guy who's a first or second round pick next year. Like, that's how good he is at right tackle. So he won that job because he's good. Mason Graham won that job because he's good. Sainer still probably should have been corner his entire career, right? Like, there was a battle between the offensive and defensive staffs over him. And he's just always said, I'll do what you ask, coach, kind of thing. But his path to the NFL is probably the secondary. So, he's a physical guy who learned a lot at receiver. So seeing him do well at nickel, not a surprise, right? So I think that's the biggest thing I took away is the names that were getting mentioned. Maybe people didn't expect them, but it's not a bad thing, right? Like, the guys behind them are still really good. That defensive line's got developed. Depth behind it, developing, right? The secondary, we didn't hear, Will Johnson's a guy that's going to be in play, right? Yep. If McBurrows can come back and be healthy, he's a guy that's going to be in play, right? So I lots of positives, man. And yeah, just happy for Graham, happy for Page. And then it's not over, right? There's still going to be with the rotations, a guy like Colson came on late. DJ Turner, who is CB1, lockdown corner now, he took that job halfway through the season. So we're just getting started in terms of, the battles and who's going to really get the big reps come, the tough part of the Big Ten schedule.
Yeah. I want to bring in Brock for this next part too. Brock, what were your thoughts on the depth chart? Did you see any surprises on there? Things that kind of stood out to you in terms? I know we've kind of hit on a lot of points here, but there's obviously always plenty of stuff to talk about. I was curious to hear your thoughts on how everything's kind of shaken out so far.
Yeah. One thing Trevor didn't touch on was Peyton O'Leary. I mean, this kid came out of nowhere. It's kind of taken me by surprise. It's weird. Michigan has like this embarrassment of riches almost at receiver. And all of a sudden you just see this walk-on who was a lacrosse recruit. Yeah. And now he's being mentioned unprompted by players and coaches. And I mean, if he's gotten a lot better than he was last year, then good for the kid. Me personally, I got to see it to believe it. I don't know how he's going to see the field over the 5 guys that Harbaugh mentioned yesterday. Yeah. Cornelius Johnson, Roman Wilson, Henning. Help me out here. Who else was there?
We said Cornelius Johnson, Andrell, Henning.
Yeah.
Ronnie Bell.
Ronnie Bell.
And Roman Wilson.
Yeah, and Roman Wilson too. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, if he's that 6th guy, great for him. But I mean, there's other guys who, me personally, I thought would have been much higher in the pecking order. So it'll be interesting to see how much he sees the field, and yeah, I'm excited to see what he's got.
Yeah, no, it's a good point on the wide receivers. I mean, Yeah, the fact that Jim Harbaugh mentioned that Peyton O'Leary is backing up Cornelius Johnson is almost unbelievable. I mean, this kid better be like just like a legit surefire player in order to pass up the likes of Darius Clemens, Morion Walker, Tyler Morris, who, by the way, the coaching staff absolutely love Tyler Morris. Told repeatedly he just doesn't drop anything. And to give Morion Walker some love too, they really love his athleticism. They think he's a freak athletically, which, you know, I don't think Michigan can never have enough freaks athletically on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, you can never have enough. So to the fact that O'Leary's name is mentioned that highly, I mean, could it be a flash in the pan? Maybe, but then you can, you know, look to the likes of Caden Colasar, was a walk-on, currently safety number 4, and per Harbaugh, Michigan's best special teams player. So, you know, I think there's always some sort of legitimacy when Harbaugh mentions walk-ons as rising the depth chart. Again, does this mean that he's going to, you know, see 15 snaps on Saturday? Maybe not. I mean, maybe Michigan goes out to like a 40-point lead, you know, in the first half, and then they trot out all the walk-ons. But we'll see. I mean, as everyone's been kind of saying here, it's very hard to believe that there's a situation that comes up that Peyton O'Leary would kind of jump over all of those 3 freshmen before them seeing the field. So yeah, we'll see. And no, I do want to bring back Davis into the conversation, get his points, and then we'll move. And then I'm going to ask Zach a recruiting type of recruiting type of question here in regards to the depth chart as well. But first, Davis, I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on the depth chart. I know you've been paying attention to it, and then a couple of positions in particular. So I was curious to hear, you know, your thoughts on how everything's going to shake out here.
The thing that I probably took, you know, obviously the quarterback, everyone is talking about that. Another one of the aspects that I found most interesting was definitely the secondary. It feels like you've got 8 guys that are ready to compete and play right now. Yeah. And one comment in particular that stood out more so than any was that Will Johnson is probably our best freshman. And that's a big comment because you like we said, we have some freshmen starting. Yeah. That's a big statement. And he's the 4th defensive back or corner. How good is that secondary going to be if your best freshman is the 4th corner? That's exciting to hear. We know what DJ Turner's going to be. We know that Jamon's going to be consistent. But how good are we going to be in the secondary? That's very exciting to hear that Will Johnson is the best freshman, but the 4th corner on the team. That's very exciting. And of course, the safeties. It feels like you have just a plethora of talent back there with Moten and obviously Rod Moore and Makari Page. And you've got guys like Caden Colasar, Keon Saab. Those guys are players as well. The secondary has a lot of depth, and I see Trev smiling. He loves him some Keon Saab. But we got some depth in the secondary, and it's something that's very exciting for Michigan fans all across the world, man.
Yeah, you know, having a healthy Rod Moore will be a good thing. And you know, you got Jaden McBurrows too, who's probably won't be ready to go until probably halfway through the year. But again, another talented guy that's kind of waiting in the wings, who Michigan really liked before he got injured, and he made a couple of nice plays too before he went down with a knee injury. But the expectation there is that he should be back ready to go halfway with the season. So. Not all is lost there, but Trevor, you kind of look like you had a point you wanted to make there with the Keon Saab talk.
No, I was just happy for you that he was brought up, so you get to talk about him again.
Yeah, no, we are Keon Saab stands over here.
Yeah. No, he's the future of the defense, and McBurrows is another guy that, for the same reason, I was really high on, and I'm bummed that he's still dealing with that injury because they're that versatile word again. We keep saying versatility. Johnson is the leader of that too in terms of the versatility. Just guys that not only cover well but hit hard and can line up as corner, nickel, safety, linebacker, or whatever. So all those guys are exciting. So yeah, hearing those names, I perk up because I'm excited to see what they can do.
Yeah. Only a few days away before we can see some of these guys in action. I think it's a good point by Davis bringing up Will Johnson being, the top freshman of the group, because when you have guys like Mason Graham who are starting, Kenneth Grant, just a handful. I think when all is said and done, Michigan is going to be having a lot of hits in that recruiting class, a lot of hits, because we haven't even talked about Deuce Spurlock, Jimmy Rolder, Micah Pollard, and there's just so many more from that recruiting class that are kind of waiting in the wings, and we'll see the field eventually that we don't really know who they are or what they are yet. The future is really, really bright in that regard. And it brings me to Zach. Zach, I wanted to ask you about, obviously your thoughts on the depth chart in terms of who's standing out, but when it comes to recruiting, when Michigan shows that they're willing to rotate guys and give legitimate shots to these young freshman type guys that, are just fresh out of high school and walking onto the team and getting starting spots, or at least, going to see the field. I'm curious if that point has kind of been mentioned in your travels, whether that's by the coaching, the coaches of these recruits, the parents of the recruits, or just the recruits in general. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are and what the kind of overall message has been in terms of, what these recruits are seeing with so many guys, being shuffled in and out.
I think the biggest message from the coaches has been, if you're good enough, you're going to play. There isn't really a promise for any of these guys, committed or uncommitted. If you come in, you're guaranteed in the rotation. I don't know if it's just, I know we got on pretty much right after his 22 cast. So we didn't see much of them we really didn't see any of them on the road. So it would have been, if we were a year before, it probably would have been nice to see how they progressed through the offseason camps and stuff. But I think, I don't know if it's just, their athleticism and the talent that the 22 class has is just being shown in fall camp, or if it's really just a depth issue. If it's the former, then it shows the 23 class, you can, come in, mirror or, emulate what they did starting in June and then have that opportunity. But I think it also shows Michigan is willing to go to the younger guys, in the promise that they were given when they were being recruited. But yeah, no, in terms of being coaches, in terms of coach communication, there hasn't been anything said if I commit, I'm starting, or
right.
If I come in, I'm definitely going to be on the special teams. I think these kids, especially the 23 class right now, they're so mature and articulate and understanding with where their position is. They know what's to be expected of them or what they can do starting in January for some of these guys. So, no, I think it just, if you are a, let's say Benjamin Hall or Cole Cabana or Amir Herring or Samaj Morgan, you see what's happening in camp and be if I do what they did, I can be the one talked about by Jim Harbaugh on the John Jansen podcast. So I think it's just motivating for these guys to continue, going above what they've done before and reaching new heights. And I know that's cliche to say, but I think it also shows I probably made a good decision by going to Michigan, because I have the opportunity to get on the field early. So, which is always the goal.
Libby, we asked about the QB situation and JJ playing and how that could impact recruits. I want to ask you, just because you're in this circle, a question people keep asking me or wondering about, with how loaded specifically on the offensive side of the ball that Michigan is, right? How good the O-line is, the talent of the running backs, the loaded wide receiver room. Do you think the style of play, do recruits want to see what Michigan's going to do on the field this year on the offense? Is that going to impact potentially recruiting? Because, You know, we've seen the rumors about some of these quarterbacks and why they're not coming to Michigan in regards to, you know, always handing the ball off or some of that talk, right? We know it's a run-first offense, but if Michigan's not coming out and being the best offense it's ever had, which it realistically should be with the talent, right? Statistically being explosive, is that going to impact recruiting? Is that what people are the recruits watching that? Not necessarily who's playing, you know, depth-wise, but what they do when they're on the field.
I just want to say nothing that recruits have not. The one thing about recruits not choosing Michigan is the team. Like, the success on the field, what have they seen on the field? That is not the reason why they go to Michigan. Like, I just want to get that clear. Like, anything that happens, you know, between the sidelines, like, recruits aren't, you know, disliking Michigan for that reason. We talked about this for months about certain other factors that don't go into the X's and O's and what coaches can do, like NIL and NIL and NIL and NIL. Like, I've heard that so many times, but no, anything that happens with Michigan in terms of actual plays and actual game days, like, no, like, recruits will go on and on about how much they enjoy watching Michigan on the television screen, how much they've liked growing up watching certain players, watching last year especially, you know, just being at the Big House in general with or without fans. Like, the football aspect is fine. Like, if this was strictly about football, we wouldn't be talking about Michigan having 14 commitments right now. So anything, that's why, like, that's why I didn't have anything to, like, ask recruits about JJ and Cade. Like, there really doesn't have effect on what they think about Michigan. The only thing that really matters is, like, obviously beating Ohio State, beating Michigan State, and going back to Indy. So no, I think recruits will just see Michigan continuing its winning and continuing its tradition, and that's what continue bringing them in. And we'll worry about outside factors later on. So I guess to answer your question, no, nothing decision-wise has been because of football, I guess you can say.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me when, you know, the biggest takeaway when you talk about the Michigan staff is that they tell you how it is, and this goes for basketball too. They tell you how it is, and they're not going to BS you. They're not going to deliver you this bill of goods in order to get your commitment. Like, oh, your freshman year, we're going to give you this, and this in terms of, you know, playing time or guaranteed spots on the depth chart or whatever. They say they're gonna tell you, you're gonna come in, you're gonna work hard, nothing's gonna be given to you. And I think they've been pretty consistent with that message, regardless of who you are. You know, you're 5-star Will Johnson or, you know, a 0-star whoever you are. It's the same message. You're going to come in and you're going to work, and we'll see what happens from there. And, you know, I don't think anyone's ever really guaranteed anything when it comes to sports. But especially, you know, when you're talking about the depth chart of Michigan, nothing is ever guaranteed. I mean, you're going to have to work. I mean, obviously, we're looking at it right now with the quarterbacks with Cade. You know, nothing's ever guaranteed. So I think that's kind of the big recruiting takeaway I get from the staff is, you know, they're going to tell you what it is, and they're going to stick to their message. They're not going to deliver you this fake, you know, this fake scenario just to get your commitment. But anyway. Moving on, I want to get into the last segment of this podcast. Obviously, we're going to talk about meaningful football. We're, you know, days away from actual football talk. No more, you know, guessing and all this stuff. We're going to have some legitimate football to base future conversations on. And I kind of wanted the last segment here, kind of wanted to go ask around the room here to kind of get what you're hoping to see during the game, and B, your score prediction. So Davis, I want to start with you. You're the first man on the clock here. Davis, what do you want to see Michigan do against Colorado State, and what is your score prediction?
Man, I want to see them run Colorado State out of Ann Arbor. That's what I want to see. What I'm interested to see is what are they going to do with the playbook? Mm-hmm. I really am, because are you going to let Cade throw the ball 35 times to prove if he can? Or are you going to hand the ball off to Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum for 40 times like we were doing last year? I don't know. Are you going to give Cade X amount of throws? Are you going to have packages still for JJ McCarthy, even though he's that? All these things, I'm so excited to just see Michigan football.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I'm excited about, and quite honestly, for a score prediction, I think they're going to run it up on them. I think Cade's going to play a hefty dose of the game. I'm thinking Michigan wins something along the lines of maybe 56-10, something along those lines. I think they definitely cover. I think they blow Colorado State right out of there, and I think they cover the 27-point spread easily, very, very easily.
Okay, all right, Brock. What about you?
Yeah, so some people aren't gonna like what I have to say about what I want to see, but I really don't care. We know that Michigan, if they wanted to, could run the ball 70 times and for 1,000 yards, and Colorado State could know it's coming, and they still couldn't stop it. I know we all know it's going to work, right? But I want to see him open up the playbook, kind of like Davis said. Let Cade show what he can do. Let's see the electric receivers, and I want to see Ronnie Bell. I want to see him catch a touchdown, go for 76 yards like he did last year, make that nice one-handed catch along the sideline that should have never been offensive pass interference.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I want to see him open up the playbook. We all know they can run, so I want to see him pass the ball. I want to see him score a lot of points. As for a score prediction, I'd say 52-13, maybe something along those lines. They definitely cover, just like Davis said.
Mm-hmm. All right, Zach. Before we get to Trevor, I want to get your thoughts. What are you hoping to see as you're getting to watch the game from the sidelines for the very first time? Look at you, lucky boy. What are you hoping to see, and what are your score predictions for the game?
Not only will I be on the sidelines, but this will be my first time ever at the Big House. So
there you go.
It'll be fun to watch. I mean, I don't have a score. I don't like to do predictions because I'm always wrong. But I just want if I never get it right. Like that's why I don't bet. Honestly, the only way that this weekend is a success is if no one talks about the score after the weekend. So like it's just a blowout. Nothing fun happens. Nothing interesting happens. It's just a week 1 tune-up game. Like I want me by the third quarter bored because nothing. Like I said, nothing fun happens. Nothing interesting happens. Nothing that's worthwhile to talk about other than the scores. So that's what my prediction is, and that's what I would consider a successful opening week.
So this means every week we're going to ask Zach for his score predictions and maybe even stat predictions too, because this seems like it could be a fun little segment moving forward. But anyway, Trevor, you're the last man up here. What are you hoping to see, and what are your score predictions?
Yeah, I think the way I would put it is I want to see Michigan pick up where they left off. Obviously this isn't the same team as last year. They're going to have to find a new identity. And that's going to be an interesting dynamic with the two different quarterbacks, but for this first game, I want to see cohesiveness on the offensive line with Olu and Jones there. I want to see Corum and Edwards show some flashes of, what's going to make them arguably potentially the best running back duo in the country. Right. I'm hoping Cade throws the ball more than 10, 15 times, at least 20 throws. They're going to run the ball a ton. They're not going to do anything crazy, but those first few games last year, we kind of were like, okay, you won, but concerned about how this is projecting out for the rest of the year. So I just want to see all three phases. I want to see the offense cohesive, efficient, moving the ball well, not having to get too crazy, but just seeing flashes of what we know that can be. The defense, obviously, I want to see somebody start to step up. Again, same thing. I want to see some flashes, right? Whether it's Upshaw or Morris or Mozzie, somebody make a play where it's like, hey, wait a minute. You know, all these questions about who's going to replace Hutch, how are we going to replace Ajabo, the pass rush, et cetera. Start seeing some flashes of that on the defense. And then it doesn't get talked about a ton, but we've got the best special teams unit in the country playing in Ann Arbor right now. And 100%. You know, if we can see some big returns with, you know, Henning on punts, sounds like Wilson's going to be taking the kick returns, whatever, but, you know, a block kick, you know, something like that. Just, again, enough flashes. I'm not, you know, because they're not going to show a ton, but just enough of those moments where we're like, okay, I can see what they're doing and how this is going to project out for the season. I mean, score-wise, I'm in the same boat. You know, it's going to be more than 40. Maybe they top 50. Colorado State, you know, Nevada's offense is what's coming over with the new head coach, and half the team.
Yeah, right.
So they're a pass-heavy offense. So, you know, especially getting into the second half when, you know, some bench guys come in, they're probably going to sneak in, you know, a 10 or 17 spot or something like that. But I don't want, like, I like what Libby said. I don't want the score to matter. I don't want to treat the game like a scrimmage, but when it gets done, I just want to feel good about the little things we saw from each unit. And then, you know, Cade's been put in a really weird spot, but he has handled this entire offseason, I think, the best you could ask him to handle. And I just want that to continue. I want him to show again why he was the captain and handle this new and unique situation that Harbaugh has put him in as well as he can.
Sure. Yeah. And to kind of wrap it up, to put a nice little bow on this whole episode here, I think for me, what I would want to see is just everyone healthy. And that goes, you know, obviously for every game, but, you know, you don't typically get that. But especially for these tune-up games, I'm really hoping to see, you know, the health of the team continue. They had a really good training camp in regards to health. Just a couple of, you know, hamstring issues was probably the worst of it, which, knock on wood, stays that way. But, you know, you don't want to see a Ronnie Bell situation of last year, week 1, you know, losing your heart and soul like that just so early. So I think the big thing, and with all of your guys' points were spot on, I think, you know, very relevant to what needs to happen on Saturday. But I think for me personally, the most important thing is getting out of there unscathed and, you know, getting the guys' experience needed to, you know, to help them along as the season progresses. And as for, you know, score prediction, I was thinking maybe like a 42-10. You know, I think what Trevor said, I think they might squeeze in a touchdown or two at the end when they've got all the scrubs in. But, you know, this game should be won pretty handedly by Michigan, and that the same thing will be said next week and the week after too. So, yeah, I mean, that pretty much wraps up the game week for us until Saturday, and then we have some actual football results to talk about. So that'll do it for us for this very first episode of Rise to the Victors podcast. Our first full season as a team is here, and we're excited for it. We couldn't be more pumped, and we'd love to have you join us at the Maize Blue Review. You can find us at michigan.rivals.com. My name is Josh Henschke. I am the publisher, and for my crew and everyone else, I just want to appreciate you listening and appreciate your continued support of us. And, you know, throughout the entire summer, we're ready to rock and roll. We've been ready to rock and roll, and you know, really excited to show off what we're going to be able to be doing this fall. So, again, thank you very much for listening, and until next week, we will see you next time. Thank you.